So hello and welcome to Expat Pod. My name is James, your host. Today I'm joined by Wiebke, who we met on Facebook because you commented on a post I put in the kind of group. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name is Wiebke, and it's Wiebke, not Wiebke or Wiebke. Yes. Yeah, it was just coincidence. I saw that Facebook post, so I really question was like someone who lived abroad or was an expat, and I was like, that's me. I think I lived in quite a few places. Other people probably lived in more, but I'm original from Germany. 29 years old, and I left when I was 23, and I left alone. The reason is complicated, but I was a police officer back then, and not sure if we want to go into that, but there's a reason why I had to leave that. But yeah, I left. The first destination was Chile. And the reason is also pretty random. I just knew I needed to leave. I was interested in learning Spanish. I like the sound of it, and I was thinking of going to Spain, but I wanted to be further away. So Latin America was the next logical place to go. And why Chile? Because I met a couple of Chileans on a festival, a heavy metal festival. In Wacken. I don't know if you know it. They just said, like, Chile's nice, you should come and visit. And I thought, yeah, why not? So I went to Chile, and I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't in the nomad mindset yet. I was just, I want to leave. I need to go. So Chile was the first place. The next one was China. It's completely different. I went back to Germany first, like for two months, and that's when it really started. Like I came back, and then I knew I want that. I don't want to ever come back, really. And that's when I sold everything and did the whole. That's it, the cut. I'm leaving for good. Then I traveled a little bit around Northern Europe, and then China. And in China, I left for a year. And then again traveling in Asia, but like I'm just telling you the countries where I actually lived, like for a longer period, and that's China, then Chile again for 2 years, and then Costa Rica, Mexico, Costa Rica again, and then and then I ended up back in Chile, and that's just because it's convenient. Maybe we'll get back. We'll get more into that why I found it most convenient, but that's more or less countries where I actually lived, where I built community and worked and felt like it was my home.
Wonderful. Well, what a great introduction. So welcome to section 1 of the podcast, all about getting there. So Wiebke, you mentioned that you've lived in a myriad of places, starting with Chile. If you'd like to share why you left, you teased about it in the introduction of why you left Germany, but if you wish to tell us why you left, but more importantly, why you chose to go to Chile, obviously to see some friends you've met in a heavy metal pod festival. But which part of Chile did you go to?
Well, like in super brief, the reason I left was because I was working in an institution that felt not suited for a small German woman, and I was only 16 when I started, and it was like I think I made the jump out of the police force just on time before it could change me. I had some health issues, so it was the right time. I had to escape. Otherwise, I don't know where it would have taken me. And one of the things that kept me sane while working as a police officer was I could be myself for 1 week a year. And that's when I went to my favorite festival, which is a heavy metal festival. I grew up like this. My parents are heavy metal fans. So I got to be there. I got to be me and show my tattoos. I wasn't allowed to show them. So I was just myself and met people and danced and went to concerts. And I love that. And there I met a group of Chileans. And I spent the whole festival with them. And they just told me a lot about their country. I heard them speak in Spanish, and I always liked Spanish. Like, I'm one of those women who think that Spanish sounds sexy, so I was like, I want to learn Spanish. And then, yeah, they said I should travel there. It's a beautiful, long country with so many things to see. Actually, Chile is longer than Europe, and I think the entire country, I don't know how you square meters, is also larger than Europe. So there's a lot to see, and I decided that's a good reason. So I decided to leave Germany to take a break from everything, and I chose Chile, and I met with these people. I actually said, I'm traveling there. And they're like, oh, seriously? Okay, come meet us. So I went to Santiago, the capital. And that's where also these guys were living. And because I wanted to learn Spanish, I signed up for a Spanish language school in Chile. It's one in Santiago, and there was a second one that is in Viña del Mar, which is a city right next to the ocean. And this is a very pivotal moment in my life because, I won't tell yet, but yeah, this is the reason why I traveled to Chile. And I actually met with them, and we had a great time. We had like one party where we listened to music and talked about the festival. And then that's it. And I went to school and I learned Spanish. It was 4 weeks in Santiago. In the Spanish school. And that's also when I realized that don't ever go to Chile to learn Spanish. Choose Mexico, or I don't know, maybe Colombia or something. Or Mexico is actually a good place if you want to learn Spanish, but Chile isn't really the place you go when you don't speak a word in Spanish.
That's so funny. And then, so you went from Chile then back to Germany, you said? When you went to Chile, was it on a tourist visa? Was it on a work visa? How did you get to travel there? Or was it a student visa maybe?
Just a tourist visa. In Chile, you can enter with a European passport. You can just enter for 90 days, and then if you wanted to stay longer, you can do a visa run. While I was living in Chile for 2 years, I did that like a few times. That I just went to Argentina, Mendoza, like the closest city, and I would just hang out there for a weekend and then come back, and I get another 90 days. It's pretty nice. So it's easy to stay as a European. I don't know for other countries.
So very much the border hopping solution that everyone seems to do. From what I've understood, I've interviewed quite a lot of people from South America recently. They all seem to tell me the same thing.
Yeah, it's it's working. I did also exactly the same in China, and that's like my way of staying in places, more or less. Although in China I wasn't on a tourist visa, but you have to do visa hopping as well. And people who lived in Southeast Asia know that especially if you don't plan to stay there forever, it works.
So your year in China then, what was the reason for traveling there? Sorry.
No, I think at this point I have to go back a little bit because after staying 4 weeks in Santiago, people were trying to convince me to go to Viña because there was the other school, and it was for 1 week, like, okay, just study 1 more week because you should meet you should go to that school in Vienna because it's a Spanish school, it's nice vibe, and it's directly at the beach, and then they do beach parties, and it's super cool. And I said, okay, why not? And I did that. And that's where I met my husband. Yeah, he was Spanish teacher in that school, and it was actually his last week there. He quit, and it was his last week in that school, week when I joined. And he wasn't my teacher, I was in a different group, but he showed up there. And he quit because he got a job opportunity in a university or something in China, in Beijing. So we only briefly got to know each other, but we knew like after 2 weeks that this can't end. So when he left and I stayed in Chile a while longer, and then my time there was over after a while, and I had to go back to Germany. And when I arrived, I only stayed, like I said, for like 2 weeks. I didn't quit the police yet. What I actually tried was I tried to study again and become criminal police, because I thought maybe that's gonna be safer and maybe I will find myself there solving cases and things. So I went back to Germany to start university, and on day one I sat there and I thought, this is awful. I hate it. I don't want. So I knew this is just the institution. I can't. Everything came back to me, and it was I felt this. I don't know. Maybe you felt it too. This feeling that there's more for you. There's something waiting for you, and you are not made for life in the country where you're born. Like, it's something, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I knew it in that moment when I sat there on my seat and I was supposed to sign a lot of papers, and I felt like, no. So I quit. That was the best moment ever. I felt so free. This was so good. And then to travel there for like 3 weeks just to visit him, and that's what I did. I went to China and I stayed with him for 3 weeks, and it was so, like, I got this feeling again. We were exploring, and I got to know people, and I even got offered a job. Guess what? Teaching English. So I didn't even speak English that well by that time. So it was funny that they were asking me. Barely understood anything. But after 3 weeks, then I went back, and that's when I went back to sell my stuff. Like, I sold my car, I sold everything I owned, so that in the end, I only had left a suitcase. Classic. I had a suitcase with stuff, and that's it. My parents have 4 other kids, so they were not, you can park anything here, like, I'll leave anything there. So it was for all the kids a clear, we're not a storage place, so you can't leave anything here. So I understand that if you have so many children. So I couldn't leave. I had like a small plastic box with some memories that I didn't want to carry around, and they accepted to keep them. My small box, that's okay. Well, then, yeah, I prepared myself for going. It was not easy, like leaving everything behind in Germany. Like, as a good German, you have like 100 insurances, and there are quite a few things you need to do in advance. But I hyper focused on that, including like giving back all my uniforms and equipment and stuff. And I had to run a lot of errands before I could be completely cut off. And I actually finished everything by burning my certificate. I don't know if that certificate is the right word, but when you become like a government official, it's for lifetime, and then you get this really fancy certificate, and it's like, yeah, that's like the life insurance basically. And I burnt it. And then we were dancing on top of the ashes after the fire was gone. So
that's good closure.
Yes, it felt right, and I never regret doing that. Not a single moment. And I left a week after. It wasn't easy. I knew I was going to be gone for a long time before I saw everyone again. Yeah, and then I went to China to start a new life. And because I was already there for 3 weeks before, I already had a job offer. I didn't take it. I just knew it was easy to get one. So I went there, and we asked around, and it was like within a few days, I had a job. and I was working as an English teacher.
And how did you get a visa? Were you in China on a tourist visa, then you changed over, or what was the circumstance for that?
The first time was on a tourist visa. The second time was a business visa. And that's, you can only get a business visa if you have connections, but you can get connections easily if you, like, either you know someone there who works for anyone in China, and they can get you an invitation. You need an invitation letter by any Chinese company. The other way, if you don't know anyone there, you can apply for it. So there are agencies who you can work with, and then they would match you with a job. In my case, I had, back then he was not my boyfriend, and he talked to his boss, and they sent an invitation letter so that I can travel there. And they were also the ones later giving me a job. So technically, it's as if I had hired them before. At first, it was like they were doing them a favor, but then in the end, they grabbed me anyways. And it's easy to get that. Not nowadays, not too much anymore, but they're still there, like through agencies. And on a business visa, you can stay like 6 months, but then you have to leave every 3. Don't ask me why, but you have to exit the country after 3 months, and then you have to stay out of the country for, I think, a week. I could be wrong. Maybe you better look that up. But I always stayed out for a week, and then I had to get a new stamp, and then can enter again.
And where did you go when you left for the week?
South Korea was a good place to go. A lot of expats went to South Korea. Sometimes we would go together with groups of people. There's a really, really great expat community in Beijing. It's not the healthiest city to live because of the pollution, but the people, yeah. I made some of my best friends there. I think they're very close and open and strong, the community, because it's so hard to make friends if you don't speak Chinese in China. So, and it's so hard to learn. And Chinese people, unless they are used to foreigners or speak some English, and they're very shy, which I understand because I'm too with people I don't understand that language. But it wasn't easy. So for many, and she had the same experience. So the expat community was great, and we would do these visa runs together. We go to South Korea or to Indonesia. And then it was always combined with a longer trip, exploring, running some errands. You had to get this visa paper in the embassy, Chinese embassy. So you had to wait until they give you back the visa. So, that's why it was 1 week. Yeah, it was 1 week because it takes 1 week until they have the papers ready.
Good time to go on holiday. Good time to always have a holiday planned.
Yeah, it's
wonderful. And then after China, you said you went to Mexico, is that correct?
No, after China, we went to Chile first. The reason was because my now husband, he wanted to see his family, and it was only planned as a visit. But we knew we wanted to leave China because, to be honest, we were not doing fine health-wise because of the pollution. It was not like I had terrible hair. My skin was always dry. We had like respiratory issues all the time, and he got he lost a lot of weight. So it was we realized at some point that this is not we cannot live here. We're not made for this, even though we loved the city, we loved the people, but health is more important. So we decided, let's leave. We didn't know where. We said, whatever, we will find a place. Let's just go to Chile first, see your family. And then in 2019, there was a big social strike in Chile, and it started 1 month after we arrived. So it was serious. There was a curfew. They closed the borders. Nobody could exit. Nobody could enter. And there were some German airlines who offered rescue flights for Germans who want to go back, who were on vacation or whatever. And I I didn't want to go, so I was okay. I will stay here with him. We were living in his house from his family, and it was a scary time because that went on for like a year, where you could hear shootings and like you never knew what was going to happen the next day. We weren't able to leave, go anywhere. We could only move around really in our city, but you couldn't leave the city because then there were always barricades, burning buses and police, and it was so that was when I started my business because I had nothing else to do. Yeah, I mean, I started already working online in China, but like I took it really seriously looking into my current industry there when I was just at home and couldn't go anywhere. When finally we had the chance to leave, maybe, was when COVID started. Yeah. So COVID started, and then we were stuck again. That's when the social strike was over all of a sudden, and people even had this conspiracy theories that COVID isn't real. They just invented it so that we would stop protesting. So that was
really
an interesting time. So that's why I stayed 2 years in Chile. It was not the plan.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna ask about Mexico. Like, so why did you go to Mexico after Chile?
We didn't go to Mexico after Chile. We went to Costa Rica. Actually, a complete change. Like, here we were living in a city, and it was nice, and our family and everything. But then I knew I wanted to go to Costa Rica because ever since I was a kid, I loved Costa Rica. I loved like tropical plants and animals. When I was like, maybe, I don't know how old I was, 8, maybe 7 or 8 years old, I told my parents that I want a room that looks like a jungle. So my parents painted the walls, and even painted tropical plants on it, and looked so beautiful. They gave me one of those beds that are high enough so you can play under it. And then they put fake plants everywhere, and it was like a cave there. And so I always loved the jungle ever since I was a kid. And there's one girl, I know her from work, and she travels a lot. She's also a nomad, and she travels to special places, like where maybe she also travels to typical places, but also special places where not everybody would go. And one of the places was also in Costa Rica. I mean, many people travel to Costa Rica, but the areas she explored were not typical. And I follow her, and I watch every single reel she posted, and I couldn't get enough of it. So I was like, I have to go. So I convinced my husband to travel to Costa Rica. He wasn't so excited about it because he hates hot weather and tropical air, like humidity. But hey, we lived 2 years in his country, so I was like, hey, let's do it. And then we went to Costa Rica because it was my dream. I never thought that I would actually do that. As a kid, I dreamt about it, and later when I was the police, I dreamt like, oh, how nice it would be, a little cabin somewhere at the beach or maybe in the jungle. But, that's just dreams. I even wrote it in my journal back then. I remember the dream became true. I did. We left to Costa Rica, and it was just how I imagined it. Like, no trains. You can get everywhere only by bus because there's so much nature. They wouldn't touch the nature. So, well, you cannot have everything. So now big infrastructure traveling is long, but I loved it. So we had like an 8-hour bus ride, and I was just in the window looking at everything, and a monkey, there's bird, a toucan, wow, and I was so excited. Bananas. I loved it. And we went to Puerto Viejo. Have you ever been there?
No, never. Further south I've been in South America is Central America, so not even south. Is Mexico.
Oh, okay, yeah. Half of Mexico is even North America, so.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I went to the south, near Guatemala.
Okay. Well, then at least the tropical weather. It's very, very similar to Costa Rica. What Puerto Viejo is a bit like it has changed now over the years. It's not so safe anymore, but it's like when you go there, it's a little town, and it's full of like hippie vibes, and now it's a bit more touristy, but it has this everywhere. You hear reggae, and the people are super relaxed, and a lot of expats also actually living there. They live in hostels. They own lots of the hostels. It has an interesting vibe. We didn't stay in Puerto Viejo only like for 1 week, but we couldn't stay there too long because it's really loud. It's like a party place, with beach parties all the time. It's not like Mexico. It's not like the Mexican beach where everything is more for tourists. This is more. There are no hotels, for example. There are only like tiny cabins and small hostels, and like very laid back people, but still full of people. So we just went for a bit more north. We just rented bikes while we stayed there 1 week. We were also working, so we needed some quiet at night. So we just rented some bikes, and we went for hours in the north, and we were just knocking on houses, asking if they know if someone rents something. And at some point, we reached a house where we at first thought it was a street, because it looked like a street, but in the end it was someone's property. And there was a woman. She came to us, and luckily my husband was speaking perfect Spanish because he's from Chile, so he socialized with her, and then she offered us a cabin that wasn't ready. So she just showed us they were building one and invited us to have a look, and then we checked it out and agreed that we could move in when they're ready. And they were then speeding up the process a bit. And then we rented it for like $500 a month. That was pretty nice. Yeah. And we stayed there for like half a year in that cabin. It was just how I wanted. It was like more, it was very hidden. Like I said, there's this long street, and you wouldn't think that someone lives there. And then there's a lot of trees, and then behind it, somewhere hidden, there were like 3 cabins. She was living in one of them. And there was another girl from El Salvador who lived there, and then us. So, and then the next, like right next to us, there were a few other trees, like maybe, I don't know, 10 meters. And then there was the beach. Beautiful, dreamy, tropical beach with white sand, and no one there, because everyone was like, all the other beaches in the other direction where Puerto Viejo, where all the people hang out in the hostels. So we were there alone. And every morning at 5 a.m., I would sit there and watch the sunrise. So that was, some of the best 6 months of my life. Part of it, I would say, because it sounds ridiculous. Like, I mean, too good to be true. Like, it's not real. Maybe some people wouldn't like that idea of living in a little cabin. It's humid, open, with an open kitchen. Yeah, there were cockroaches and other animals too, so you can't be afraid of those. That was the first destination in Costa Rica. We were not these people who travel every week or every other few weeks for days somewhere. So we were always staying somewhere for long, and we thought of staying even longer, but they didn't let me into the country anymore when I was doing the visa run to Panama, because they had some strong requirements about health insurance during the COVID phase. In Costa Rica, you can also just stay 3 months with the European passport, also with the Chilean passport. You enter and you get a visa on arrival, 3 months tourist visa. Back then, you also needed like all the vaccination and health insurance if you don't have all the vaccinations. I got vaccinated there in Costa Rica. And then I went to do a visa run to Panama, and which is super nice because you have to cross a bridge to go from Costa Rica to Panama. On the other side of the bridge is Panama. That was cool. We were in the middle taking pictures. I'm in between Panama and Costa Rica. Yeah, and then they found a gap in my insurance on my way back. We just stayed like 2 hours in Panama, and then we wanted to go back. And then they found a gap. Like, they were checking it. And something I didn't know. I didn't know about it. So there I was in Panama. I didn't even bring my stuff, just the purse. So and they didn't want to let me in. They were gonna deport me back to Panama. Yeah, and then I called the insurance. It was from Safety Wing, this Nomad insurance. Do you know it?
Oh no, I don't.
Well, it's super cool for nomads. It's made for nomads, made by nomads for nomads. So you pay but like $45 if you're under 40, and then you have a basic health insurance. You have everything covered that you might need for accidents, for like general consultation if you have a toothache. Or US is not covered. You have to pay extra for US, but everything else is it's nice. So I called them and said, help, what can I do? And then they sent me a link for another insurance and say, we don't have any, like our insurance doesn't cover it. That was like a special gap for COVID, like covering a specific amount of hospital expenses during that time. And that insurance didn't cover it, for COVID hospital expenses. So they sent me a link for another insurance, and that costs like, I don't know, $200 a day. That was too much, and I bought 4 days. So and I did it on the spot, like super fast. So it was just half an hour until they were closing the borders, because they had like open close hours between Panama and Costa Rica and that specific border there. So they understood me. They was okay, we wait for you. But then the police was already standing next to me waiting to escort me back to Panama. And then I was on my phone and buying this super expensive insurance. And it worked. So they let me in with a stamp for 4 days. Then my dream was over. So we went back sad to our little cabin, and then we started packing. And then we went to San Jose, to the capital, and we rented an Airbnb for 3 days and stayed there, and we're thinking, what now? We have to leave, but we don't know where. And that's when we went to Mexico. Why? Because I found a cheap flight. It was like less than 100 for both of us. So I was checking everywhere. I was checking for every single country, even Chile, like all Latin American countries. I checked them all on Skyscanner and whatnot. And then Mexico was the cheapest flight. So it was a really good decision. I mean, coincidence. The money decided that for me. But that's how we ended up in Mexico. And a new adventure started.
And was that, again, the tourist visa for Mexico?
Same visa on arrival, 90 days. Although we thought it was going to be half year, like 160 days, but that changed. People say that it's easy to enter Mexico, and you can just go in, and they will give you 90 days or maybe even half a year, but that's not that easy anymore. So you have to have an onboard flight for entering Mexico. If you don't, they might give you only 30 days or maybe only 2 weeks. There were a lot of people who, for some reason, didn't check what they had written on their tourist card. They write the number, how many days you can stay, and there were a lot of people who just didn't check and just stayed for 90 days, and they actually were only allowed to stay 30 days, and then they were caught by the police, put in prison, and that's not fun. So I always check. I don't know why they wouldn't, but always check what the authorities write on your stamp, or if you get like a little card, what they write. In Chile, you also get a card and they write the days. So yeah, we entered, and we had a similar problem. They wouldn't let us enter the country because we didn't have an onboard ticket, because we checked the internet and it says everywhere you can just enter if you have a Chilean or a European passport in our cases. But it wasn't like that. They asked for onboard flight, and we said we don't have one. We can buy one right now. And they were like, no, because now we know you were just buying it just so you can enter. So we almost couldn't enter the country, but because my husband speaks Spanish, native, so he negotiated with them. So he eventually got in for 90 days. Like the woman who didn't want to let us in, she had to call her supervisor, and then he negotiated with that guy. She was doing her job, and she was strict. Then the supervisor in the end was the one who was a bit more, he let us in. So I was glad to have him around. I probably wouldn't have managed alone. I'm not sure. Yeah, and then we stayed in Mexico City. I love Mexico City, one of my favorite cities in the world, but it doesn't have access to water. I mean, the ocean. So I couldn't stay there long term. So in Mexico, we were more traveling around, not very slow. We were not like exploring a lot of places. We were traveling slow because we're working full time, both of us. So we just switched places inside of Mexico City. We spent Christmas there and New Year's Eve, and it was nice. And then we traveled to different cities, also to the south and Merida. And then we also went to this island. What's it called? Cozumel. Maybe you know that one.
Oh yeah, I've been to Cozumel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I also know it's different to those like busy beaches in Costa Rica, like this Puerto Viejo beach. Cozumel was nice too, but also too crowded. And we spent 3 months there. And then I wanted back to Costa Rica. I wanted my house back, and I wanted to be back and we knew we had to leave. And we were in Mexico. We were actually looking for a place to stay long term. We wanted to live somewhere, have a home base, and then keep traveling, but with a place to come back to. And we thought that could be Mexico, but I couldn't stop thinking about Costa Rica. So we came back to Costa Rica, and what I did was I just looked for the most remote place I could find in Airbnb. It ended up to be a tree house in the jungle in the southern area possible on the Pacific side in Costa Rica, close to the border to Panama. This time on the other side, the Puerto Viejo was on the Caribbean side, but that time we went to the Pacific side. That was really interesting. Like we stayed another 6 months there, and it was also close to the ocean. It's not one where you can swim. It has really heavy waves. It's known for having the longest left wave in the world, or second longest, I think. So lots of surfers are there in the nearby. I managed to surf. I think I never. I was surfing in Chile before, but I managed to stay on the board for like, I don't know, it felt like forever. I have no idea how long it actually was. Maybe it was 30 seconds, maybe more, but it was really long for surfing a wave as someone who doesn't surf regularly. So I was like, wow. There are like maybe 50 people living there, and there was like one tiny store with basics, and I was like little hut with a few things. There was the next supermarket 1 hour away with a motorbike, the next hospital 3 hours. There was a pharmacy 2 hours away that had a doctor, and had to go there once because I had a bite from a spider or something. So it's really, really remote. People who work there just work there, like they grow their own food, and it was nice. There was some tourists sometimes, because in the mountain there was a yoga center. They were not teaching yoga class. They made I don't know how to say that now. I got losing all my words. For a yoga teacher, so you can become a yoga teacher there in this center.
Okay, like yoga school.
Yeah. So I think they called it yoga farm, but they're classes for becoming an instructor. And they have also their self or like organizing. They have vegetable gardens. They're open. You could just go there and walk around, and we did once. And they have their own water sources. And food, so it was nice. And we lived like we were almost neighbor with the yoga farm, and that's it. And the rest are all locals, indigenous, who are selling alcohol to us. Yeah, and it was such a beautiful community. And like on weekends, sometimes we would all get together. The locals, they were so nice and open and inviting us and yoga people to eat tacos with them. I love that place. So I stayed for 6 months. My husband actually only for 4 months. He left to Chile for 2 months. I stayed alone there in the jungle. It was also nice. I think my heart is still there in Costa Rica. We had to leave again at some point, and we went back to Mexico. And then we stayed there 6 months, I think. In Mexico City again, Guanajuato. That's a beautiful, colorful city. I cannot recommend it.
It seems to have lots of ups and downs, or never boring. It's never been plain sailing for you. That's a great way of ending the first section of this podcast.